الرحيم صلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome to Star Wars across the UK. My the reason I'm here, as opposed to someone else to talk about Star Wars, is because I am actually a real fan of Star Wars. I run my halaqat. I call them Jedis and Padawans. Actually, Padawans and Jedis. I wanted to have a halaqah and call them younglings, but I thought they might be insulted. So we started with Padawans. How many people here you've never seen Star Wars? Okay, so there are a couple. So just for those of you who are the Star Wars experts, forgive me while I quickly sum up why we're talking about Star Wars. In the 1970s, the first 3 movies came out. I was about 12 years old then. I know, seems like ancient history, but it's true. I was about 12 years old, and I went to see them in the theater, and I loved them. And you have to imagine, it was the 1970s, and the effects and all of this was really something. But George Lucas, he created these films purposely. Part of the reason was to create a space where young people could believe in God again. And so the creation of the Force and the idea of the Force was created around, I guess, a hope, if you will, of in a very modernist age to talk about God in society once again. So I was in the 70s. Now, the 80s, I graduated high school in 1984. Yes, I know. You cannot even imagine how long ago that was. And yes, we did have refrigerators. No, we did not have smartphones or the internet. Imagine. I became a Muslim in 1985, January 1985. So I had just turned 18. And again, that was pre-Google. It was in Minnesota. If you know where Minnesota is, if you can think of the United States, here, Chicago, New York, I suppose the way you're looking at it, Chicago, New York, Florida, Texas, down here, Canada, Minnesota, all right? Minnesota's right on the border with Canada, so we don't have, in 1985, we didn't have a very large Muslim community, as you can imagine. But we had 101 because I became a Muslim. And it was a really tough time to be a Muslim woman in the United States. My road to Islam is not what this talk is about, but just a couple of tiny things so I can give you an idea about why I'm a Star Wars person. I was very much kind of an academic-y person. I was interested in learning, and I felt like you could solve things by learning about them. And so I was taking classes. That's actually how I became Muslim. And that's another topic. But once I became Muslim and walked into the Muslim community, and I was like flabbergasted by the utter lack of what I thought was the utter lack of understanding of what it meant to be a Muslim woman in society, then I decided the solution to that would be learning as well. And so it's a long story, but the short end of the story is I moved to Damascus. I found a Syrian boy. Somebody told me that for women, the best place to learn would be Damascus, Syria. That's where the women teachers are. So I found myself a Syrian boy, married him, and moved there. The story is a little longer, but that's basically the idea. My grandmother wrote me an 11-page letter about how he's just marrying me for my American citizenship. I said, Grandma, he's already got a passport, but I am marrying him for his Syrian citizenship. Anyway, we moved over there, and I spent time over there studying. And then in the 90s, what happens? The next 3 Star Wars movies come out. So the first 3, for any real Star Wars movie buffs here, the first 3 are usually the favorites. They're the place where the Force is really investigated, Yoda is a real character, and really the crux of the story is in those first 3 movies. The prequels, in other words, sort of filling in the gaps of who was Darth Vader and what happened before, those happened in the 90s. I watched those in Damascus, and I still liked them. But I mean, I can hold a discussion with you around their sort of breaks with the original story of the Force and what happened there and the sort of problematic pieces of that regarding Star Wars as a film and as a story, but that's not about tonight, so I will refer to them in a minute. Then the war started in Syria, so I stayed there. I was never planning to leave Damascus. I was going to stay there forever. In fact, I had the difficult conversation with my in-laws when I told them, you see that plot over there in that cemetery and that place up in the mountains of Muhajirin? That's where I want to be buried. And then we don't talk about this. But that's how serious I was about never leaving. Then the war hit, and I had a son at the time in high school. And so in 2012, the summer of 2012, again, it's a longer story, but I picked up my son and moved back to my state. My state was Minnesota. When I was there, I traveled around, and I had some students that used to come to Syria to learn with me, study with me. And so they took me on a little tour, and I was shocked to find out, or to see, that really the state of Muslim women, in the United States at least, hadn't really changed in the last 20 years. And so being stuck there, I started an organization, and we do stuff with we work on positive cultural change through creative educational opportunities, which is certainly one of the reasons why running around the UK talking about Star Wars is right up my alley, because a creative educational opportunity. In the last 10 years, the last 3 movies have been coming out. These last 3 movies now are telling the later story. What happened later? And that's what we're all going to find out at the end of the month. For the real Star Wars fans in the room, we're all wondering who Rey is and who her parents are, and is she really from no one, or is she a Skywalker, or who is she? But today's topic, very specifically, is maps from the dark side. So the plot of the movie, for those of you who haven't seen it, the basic plot of the movie is evil, good. They fight in order to try to bring peace to the universe. Instead of the globe, we have the whole universe. The good are the Jedis, and they access the Force. And through the Force, they are peacekeepers. And then the evil are the Sith. And they also have access to the Force, but they're on the dark side. And their access to the dark side makes them unusually ugly. One of the best parts of the first 3 movies, for the real film experts here, you'll notice that the Emperor gets progressively uglier in the 3 films. And so this is our first map. There are 3 maps we're going to talk about today, maps from the dark side. And really, these are maps as Muslims, because in the end, this is a talk that has to do with how are we managing as Muslims in our global society today, in the society that we're living in. Just about my story quickly, when I lived in Syria, I lived there for 20 years. For 20 years, I studied Islam. For 20 years, I studied Islam, Quran, Hadith, Arabic. So when I left and went back to the United States, I had this idea in my head that where I had seen myself is where I would see everyone else. And I was really surprised, because when you go to a place, you begin to imagine that everyone is in that place with you. So in 2012, when I started realizing that it wasn't like that, there were places and times, you have to imagine, where was I? I was in this psychological state where I had left the place I wanted to live forever, and I was facing a Muslim community that hadn't grown at all, in my opinion, at the time. And that was a place where the dark side could easily have entered into my life. Because the dark side, we're going to talk about 3 ways. One way of the dark side, we all know, those of you who are Star Wars people, from Yoda, the first map from the dark side is the map of fear and anger, and that brings you to the dark side. The second map to the dark side is the place of diseases of the heart. Islamic scholars for centuries have talked about and designated and pointed out how diseases of the heart bring us to a place of ugliness, and really diseases of the heart can strip us of all that is good and bring us into the dark side for our talk today, or to the place of loss, of the loss of faith. And those are diseases of the heart. And the third map of the dark side we'll talk about later. So let's talk about the first one. Let's talk about fear and my own road, my own fight against the dark side. When I came back to the United States, I was really grieving. It was a really hard time for me. I was in my country with my family, so you should imagine that it should have been fairly easy for me. I was in my country with my family, but I didn't know how to apply for a job. Everything had changed. I left the United States pre-internet, and now I was there when everything was on internet. And I didn't know how to apply for a job. And I fumbled around and tried to apply, and then I found the Islamic school. Now I have a master's degree in curriculum theory and instruction. By the time I went back to the United States, I had trained teachers across the Middle East in how to be better teachers. The Ministry of Education in Qatar had asked me in specific, me to come in. I was really good at what I did, and people thought I was good at it. And I ran a school, I was academic director. I had all these credentials in the world of education. And I was a qualified Islamic scholar. I had studied Islamic sciences and Arabic and Quran. So I go to the Islamic school. I want to work. I need a job. And the principal was my friend, actually. And she said, well, how do I know you're going to stay? And I was like, because actually I wasn't planning on staying. I was hoping to go back in 5 months. I said, I'll stay a year. She said, how do I know you can handle being a teacher? I was like, what do you mean? Anyway, long story short, I didn't get that job. So here I was without a job in a situation where my money was running out, my children, my son was entering into public high school, and he had been in Sharia school in Damascus. It was a dark side for me. It was a time in life when things were really hard. My friends, there was war in Syria. My friends were still living there. My in-laws were still living there. People were dying. And I had more than once within the next couple of years news of people I cared very much about who had been killed or had died in that situation. So in that is a place for Muslims, for anyone really, where we can go to the so-called dark side. It was a place of great trauma. It was a place of real grief and real pain. And I really did not know what to do. The Jedi response, if you know what the Jedi response to the dark side in that situation is to fight the dark. That's the Jedi response. The Jedi response is get out the lightsaber, fight whoever the robots are that are trying to kill you, or the clones or whatever, fight it, do whatever you can to get rid of the Death Star, find out what you can do to stop the darkness and the dark side from over-encompassing your life. So what I did is I wrote a book, and I used to write every week. I used to write essays about Islamic stuff. And I wrote this book, and to be honest, I didn't find out until later that this was one of my methodologies of getting rid of the dark side. I wrote this book, and it's called Joy Jots. Joy Jots, Exercises for a Happy Heart. And after I wrote it and published it, a high school friend of mine who I hadn't seen in 30 years asked to meet me at our Daybreak bookshop. And so she met me there, and after we had a long conversation, she said, now I want to buy your book. And I said, oh, if you write a book and you author a book, you really feel good when people say, I want to buy your book. So I said, oh, sure. And she said, yeah, the one you wrote about grief. I said, oh, excuse me. I didn't write a book about grief. I wrote a book about joy. She said, no, I'm really sure you wrote a book about grief. I said, and I was a little bit offended. And I said, no, my book is called Joy Jots, Exercises for a Happy Heart. And she said, oh, okay. All right, well, I'll take that book. But after she left, and I would say probably by the next day, I really sat with what she asked me. And I realized she was absolutely right. The book Joy Jots was my attempt week after week, because it was an essay a week that I was writing, week after week, to white knuckle it through grief, to lightsaber it, if you will, using our metaphor for today, through grief. To find a way to find joy in the situation that I was in at that time. And so this path of the dark side, no Muslim is immune. Sometimes when we come to faith, we begin to believe that we are immune from trauma. We're immune from the ugliness of humanity. We're immune from poorly behaving imams, or from cultures and societies that have a negative impact on us. But the truth is that no one is immune to the world that we live in. No one. It doesn't matter who you are. There is no such thing as being immune. In the world of the Star Wars metaphor that we're using, there is only equipping yourself to manage the world and the situation you're given. And everyone's life, excuse me, according to Imam Sha'rawi, who was a mufassir of Egypt, rahmatullah alayhi, he wrote, and he actually did most of his tafsir orally, and it was written by his students. But his tafsir is very, very beautiful. One of the things he says, he's explaining a verse of the Quran. And he says that the tafsir of this verse is that every human being will have, over time, basically the same life. That over time, the levels of trauma and difficulty will balance out. Now, someone like me, who left a war, I could easily say to myself, and I've heard people say this before, how is that true? How many people do we know in the world that didn't experience war? What about someone who has terrible trauma, home abuse in the house? How do we say that that's the same as someone else who never saw that? We don't know. We don't know. All we know is that this life of ours that we're given is the life that we live in, the environment that we live in, and we are given the tools to manage it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, that he doesn't trial a person except for what they can bear, it's not a suggestion. It's not a suggestion. When I speak to only women, when I speak to mothers about this verse, I usually make an example of giving birth, because there's a point in giving birth where every woman, it doesn't matter what country she's from, it doesn't matter, there's a point in giving birth where every woman thinks she's gonna die right now. And the only women in the audience that are nodding are the ones who've had children, yep. But there is that point. But لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. It is at that point that it's over. It's at that point that it changes to the next stage. Because there's never a time in our life when we have trialed more than we can bear. When we know that that's a fact, then whatever those trials are, we'll find the tools that we need to manage the trauma and move forward into the light side. But it is definitely a map from the dark side that anyone who has fallen into that Sith space knows that one way to fall there is to fall there because of trauma and harm that comes to us from outside of us. Now, just as a little warning, as we talk about those Sith, I would like you all to remember, the Star Wars people here have to remember this, and the rest of you just have to trust us. In the first 3 movies, there's this gradation of the head Sith. The Sith are those who are on the dark side, okay? They access the dark side of the Force. And they get uglier, and he gets uglier and uglier. And it's really something, because the deeper he gets into death and killing and violence and ugliness, the uglier he gets. And even when you go to the prequel, though they messed it up a little bit, that's my opinion, though they messed up a little bit, you still see the Sith very ugly, very ugly. And when you go to these last 3, the real Sith is incredibly ugly. So there's an ugliness that comes from the dark side. You might say to yourself, how is that? It's not an ugliness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he created us, he created the way we look on the outside. That's how we look. But the way we look on the inside changes. And there's an ugliness that will come forth. Now, maybe you won't see that ugliness in the mirror. But it is an ugliness, and an ugliness that intensifies with the deeper that we get into the dark side. So the one map from the dark side is the map of trauma. And the way to get away from that map of trauma is to cling to husn al-zan billah, to cling to thinking well of God. So what was I doing in that first year? I had husn al-zan billah, and I was writing it out so that I could remind myself every week. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-adil. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ar-Rahman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Wadud. Who is God? God is the loving, God is the merciful, God is the just. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, is the Kareem, the generous. The way we think of God deeply affects the way we interact with our surroundings. And whether or not we will stay on the path of the light side or fall into the dark side. Everyone has felt the temptation of the dark side. Whether it's a temptation of fully being enveloped by the dark side or just a moment of it. But if we understand that the end of the dark side is pain and ugliness, in the third movie of the prequels, the person who becomes the big villain is Darth Vader. Darth Vader is originally Anakin Skywalker. As he walks down the dark side in the prequels, in the third movie, you find him on the beach, having been burned from the fire of the lava pit, in pain and loneliness, away from everyone he ever loved, and thinking he has just killed the one woman he just loved as well. As his teacher, who he did love, walks away from him because of his selfish and arrogant behavior. So we see the end of this dark side as a place of pain and loneliness. And that's true. The end of all the three dark sides is a place of pain and loneliness. So there's real motivation to choose the light side. And I'm not saying that the light side is easygoing flowers and daisies, but it doesn't have the pain and the ugliness and the loneliness of the dark side. The second path to the dark side is the path of amrad al-qalb, the diseases of the heart. Diseases of the heart are those diseases like Fir'aun. Fir'aun was the Sith of the Quran. Nobody tweet that. Shaykha Tamara said there's a Sith in the Quran. No, it doesn't actually say that. But in our metaphor, Fir'aun becomes a Sith. Why? How? Here is a man who was killing babies. Think about that. He's killing baby boys, slaughtering baby boys. Of course he was a Sith. And then he ran around telling people, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى, I am your Lord the Most High. It's just like the emperor. You'll listen to me. And Darth Vader says to one of his generals, your faith is, what does he say? Your faith, I don't know, after he chokes him to death, he tells him, your faith isn't good enough for me. Faith in the power of the Force. Fir'aun isn't any different than that. We have an example in the Quran of someone who the dark side takes to great evil. But that dark side is caused by arrogance, real arrogance. Arrogance that made him say, I am your Lord the Most High. Now, that's the end result of it. But we also have those who, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we see there are different people, but there are a number of people who thought that they might enter into Islam. One of them was one of the greatest enemies of Islam. His name was Walid al-Mughira. And he would go at night, during the early days of Mecca, he would sneak at night and listen to Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr recites Quran while he was in the garden of his home. And they found out about this, and so Abu Jahl went to him and said, look what he says to him, I'm going to give you money. Walid says, what are you talking about? I'm of the richest of men. He says, well, if you are going to Abu Bakr's house to seek of his charity, I'll give you money instead. What is he doing? What is he doing? He's on the dark side, playing with the arrogance of Walid, that I don't want people to talk about me. It's shameful for me for people to think I'm in need. So he swears he won't go back. He doesn't go back, and he becomes of those who torture the Muslims of Mecca. Real torture. They would wrap them in burlap and cook them on hot coals. It was very, very ugly. Something very ugly for someone to do right in front of themselves. But where did this darkness come from? Where did it come from? Where is the darkness of someone like Hind, who can tear open the body of Hamza and eat from the raw liver, wa'a'udhu billah, astaghfirullah al-azim, of someone who is beloved to the Prophet ﷺ? Okay, she didn't feel those feelings, but just to do that act as an Arab woman to an Arab man from her tribe, it doesn't make any sense. How could she do that? What overwhelming inner sickness gave her the ability to do such a sick thing? What overwhelming inner sickness made Fir'aun slaughter babies? What overwhelming inner sickness made Walid al-Mughira, though he loved and appreciated the recitation of Abu Bakr, join forces with those who tortured? It's the darkness of the sickness of the heart. And this is a path. This is another map of the dark side. The sicknesses and illnesses of the heart that overcome us. Now, there are many possible illnesses of the heart. Probably the most prevalent ones today are hubb al-dunya, kibr. I'll think about what the third. There are many. I'll think about the third one. Hubb al-dunya is love of this world. We love this world today not because we love it so much, but because we believe in it. We're like, this is a table. I know it's real. This is a table. It has 4 legs. I know it's real. I can believe in it. I can love it. I can get a more expensive one. I can get one made by a famous furniture designer and love it even more. And we cling to it. Don't take my table. This is my table. And don't sit in my chair. It's my chair. And this thing belongs to me, and I don't want to give it to you. Why? Because we see it. We believe it's real. But we don't have hubb al-akhirah. We don't love the angels. We don't see them. We don't really experience them. We don't have love for the miracles or the karamat of the awliya. What is that? That's a legend from a long time ago. We don't feel and understand the reality of angels, jinn, and the unseen world. No, the unseen world, that's just, yeah. That's what we learn about that in Sunday school. It's, yeah. No one is saying it's not real. But we don't feel it like we feel the table. And so, of course, we love what we know. We love what we know. Even the Prophet ﷺ, who knows the Prophet? ﷺ, we don't know the Prophet ﷺ anymore. Muslims don't know the Prophet. Forget about peoples of other faiths. Of course they don't know him if we don't know him. But we don't know the Prophet ﷺ because we have been trained since 1096 when Pope Urban II sent the very first crusade. And after him, generation after generation after generation of the English canon of literature, from from Dante to Frankenstein to Goethe to Voltaire, one after another, to Martin Luther, creating a villain named Muhammad. Astaghfirullah al-azim. I'm not saying that we learn that directly, but we pick it up. And so, I know you guys are in England, but you all know what a cactus is, right? I'm from America, that's a joke. You can smile. So, when you have a cactus in your house, the cactus can have it has little not sticky, but pointy things, right? And if you touch it, or cactus fruit, do you have cactus fruit here in England? If you make the mistake, prickly pear you call it, yeah? No? You don't call it that? This thing, you have this thing. What do you call it? You don't know. Huh? Okay, that's not gonna help me. There's a fruit. If you pick it up, everyone in the Arab world knows you have to have thick rubber gloves to pick it up, or you're in trouble. So if you don't know that and you pick it up, you're gonna get little teeny tiny cactus bits in your hand. And then you look, and you can't see them. It's not like a sliver. You go to, and you wash it, it's still there. You have to literally go like this and find it and use tweezers to pull it out. This is the state of the heart of most Muslims today. It is a heart filled with cactus pins, if you will, I don't know what they're called, about the Prophet ﷺ. Each time we read in a textbook as a child in public school something that was a little bit off, when we had to read Frankenstein, even Anne of Green Gables, and all these different books and places, a social studies book, something you Googled, a YouTube video that you saw, a movie, literature after literature after literature that presented Muslims as terrorists or as Islam as the problem. All of these things collect around our hearts, little bits of cactus that hurt. But as a result, we don't love the Prophet ﷺ like we love this table, because we know the table. But we don't know the Prophet ﷺ, not anymore, not really. And so we end up with an ill heart. There's a sick heart, there's sickness in the heart. Hubb ad-dunya, we love the world more than we love the things of the next world. I've been giving the same example, but I'll give it again. From our phones, this phone that I am a tech person too, I like iPhones. I'm very upset that I don't have the brand new one. And I'm an Apple person, so if you really can't stand Apple, I apologize. I understand the political implication, but it's still fun for me. Anyway, I would doubt that anyone in this room does not have a smartphone of one kind or another. And when that battery gets down to 1%, that you're not all panicking and just finding any way to plug your phone in. Most of us have purchased a battery just in case. Or you have friends who carry the cords around with them, or you carry the cord. And if you don't have the cord or you don't have a battery, you will introduce yourself to someone, you don't care who it is, and say, "Can I borrow your cord?" No problem, because I gotta get my phone back on. There's something important going on here. I need my phone on. Hubb ad-dunya. There's nothing wrong with recharging our phone. But when it comes to recharging our heart, we're not really serious about it. It's like, no problem. Oh, I'm in the north. I have 15 minutes to pray dhuhr. No problem. I'll pray it tomorrow. Where is the recharging of the heart? Where is the insistence? I have to recharge my heart right now. I have to find a way to figure this out. Just like you're going to borrow a cord from someone, where is I am absolutely going to pray. Not praying and having hubb ad-dunya and not seeing the things of the other life, the unseen world that are really just as real. In fact, more real and longer lasting than these things of this dunya, is a map from the dark side. Because it becomes an attachment. It becomes an attachment until we lose touch with who we really are. As Jedis, as Yoda says, we are luminous beings, not this stuff. He says that to Luke out in the swamp. We're luminous beings. Yeah, we are. We are beings created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this map, this hubb ad-dunya, too much dunya, is a weight. It's a heaviness. And we get a heaviness inside and we don't know how to grow out of it. We have arrogance. Arrogance is another ugly disease that drags us down into the center of the swamp. And this one drags us down because we're not able to find any other opinion except for our own. We get wrapped up in what we think. And what's the way out from this one? What's the way out? The way out from the diseases of the heart is to find a cure for the disease. Just like the way out of a physical illness is to find a cure for that physical illness. In the same way, the way out for spiritual illness is to find a cure for that spiritual illness. In Islamic heritage texts, in the writings of Amrad al-Qalb and things like this, spiritual diseases, we have many, many early people who wrote about them, from Ibn Taymiyyah to Ghazali, one after the other. We have many. We see that every disease has its own path to a cure. But they all have a similar cure as well. The one thing that brings them all together in cure is dhikrullah, the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The willingness to spend time in the repetition of Allah's name in any way. And subhanAllah, we have this really incredible religion where we have ritual prayer, we have dua, and we have dhikr. Ritual prayer, it's like this. You can't decide today, oh, you know what? Today I'm going to do my salah while I dance. No, it doesn't work. It's one way. Today I'm going to pray while I'm driving my car. No, although I did have someone tell me once that she prays while driving. And I was like, no, can't pray and drive at the same time. Anyway, never mind. And so ritual prayer is very specific. Then we have something else called dua. Dua is all out there. What language do you speak? You can do dua in it. Where are you standing? You can make dua. When I was becoming Muslim, I wasn't a Muslim yet. I asked this Muslim about Islam, and he said to me, oh, you don't want to be a Muslim. It's a very difficult religion. And I said, what do you mean? And one of the things he said, you have to pray 5 times a day. And I said, I was a Christian, so I was like, I pray more than that. Of course, I didn't mean salah. I meant dua. Dua is something we do, and Muslims do all the time. You can pray while you're walking to class. You can pray while you're making salad. You can make dua while you're going to sleep at night. Dua can be nonstop. And there's no language that you can memorize some of the dua of the Prophet ﷺ. You can memorize dua from the Quran. That's all beautiful, but it's not part of what it means to make dua. Dua is any word, anything that you do when you're talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then there's a third type, which is dhikr. Dhikr, there's a prescription for it. There are words and phrases that we're asked to say. But nonetheless, it's much less ritual than ritual prayer. It has to do with repetition. It's more similar to meditation. It's repetition of certain phrases of praise. The names of Allah, Azza wa Jal. Name, or His name, or Allahu, or La ilaha illallah, or Subhanallah, or Astaghfirullah, or even Salat ala Nabi. All of these they fall under dhikr. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran talks about salah, siyam, Ramadan, fasting, and hajj. All are there lidhikrillah. Lidhikrillah, meaning they're there for the purpose of remembrance of God. So dhikr becomes something that is part of our purpose as human beings. And so you see all of the scholars, when they're giving many, many different cures for many different diseases, there's one that lays gently over all of them. And that is dhikrullah. Dhikr will take you out of yourself if you're arrogant. Dhikr will take you out of this dunya if you have hubb ad-dunya. Dhikr will help you to stay in the place of health spiritually and help you move away from the dark side that we find ourselves in if we let the diseases of our heart take over us. So the first path is when the outside world takes over and hurts us and causes us pain. That's the first dangerous path. The second dangerous path is when our inner world we allow it to overcome that which can be beautiful in being a human being. The third is when our actions and our behaviors take us down the map of the dark side. What is that? So I have had people tell me before, it doesn't matter what you do, it's your intention that matters. Now we are a religion of intention, to be sure. We are a religion of intention. Intention matters very, very much. The very first hadith in Riyadh al-Salihin is the hadith that tells us that it's all about intention. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Indeed, your deeds are in their intentions. So if I intend to do good, that's what I'm going to do. And but if we can't make an excuse of the oppression of people with good intentions. And so one part of the dark side is when we insist on living in our blind spots and living a life that allows for the oppression of others, no matter who they are. When we say, I'm just going to walk like that, I'm going to be a horse. You know how the horses used to go down the roads, especially in London because the roads are tiny. They used to put, what do you call them? Blinders. You call them something else over here, okay. American word. Blinders, okay, like this. Why? Because if the horse would see something here or here, it would get spooked. And very often what happens to us as human beings, when we see something of truth, we're spooked. We don't like it. We have, as a Muslim ummah, a lot of problems. We have racism. We We have really serious racism in our societies, in our communities. It's really shocking. And we really don't want to talk about it. It's uncomfortable. Because we talk about it, we have to admit, oh, wait, it's not just those people who are racist against us. We have racism within as well. Racism is a path to the dark side. We have sexism in our, oh, are you one of those feminazis? I mean, that's when I say, oh, we've got sexism, oh, don't talk about that. No, it's okay, we have it, it's a problem. It's a problem. It's walking down, when we allow blind spots. So we end up encouraging the oppression of people. This is another path to the dark side. We have classism. We have how much money do you make? How much money do I make? This is a classic Calvinist idea that we've picked up on. And from classism to racism to sexism to just straight up oppression of people and closing our eyes to it and pretending it doesn't exist. This is not إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. We can't say, I didn't mean to hurt you. That's not enough. We can't say, I didn't intend to bother anyone. It's not enough. We have to intend to be the people we are intended to be. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in many places in the Quran, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at many different times, reminds us again and again and again that we are the ummah that has been called upon to embrace and promote and uplift and amplify what is good and khair, and to push back against and walk away from and push away that which is ugly and harmful. If we're to take that seriously, we have to learn how to remove our blinders and be willing to talk about and face the hard stuff. The stuff we don't want to talk about. The hard stuff that makes it difficult. This is in America. I have a young student, she was 7 months pregnant, convert, and she was in a city that was not her city, and she wanted to pray. Now, if you are a young woman alone in a city and you want to pray, where are you going to go? The mosque. MashaAllah, what a good idea. She was told she can't come in. And so she had to pray in the parking lot. Does this make sense? Of course not. We all know, everyone in this room knows it doesn't make sense. Everyone in this room, I hope, would say, that's ridiculous. I was an invited speaker to a mosque where I spoke. And then it was a weekend program. And the next morning, it was time to pray Fajr. I'm 53 years old, and I'm a grandmother. And so walking upstairs is actually quite, alhamdulillah, actually it's not a problem for me anymore, but that time I had a really bad knee. And it was really difficult to go up the stairs. I wanted to pray in the masjid. I wasn't allowed. So I stood out in the freezing cold parking lot, the invited speaker, while the mosque had 2 lines of men and 50, there was plenty of space for me and like 50 students, and still there would be lots of space between the men and the women. And what is happening in our community? When we will all go to the coffee shop and be professional, and those of deen and taqwa, we can go to the coffee shop and interact with politeness and professionalism with whoever sells us coffee, but we don't know how to be professional in the jami' and the mosque. There's a problem here. There's a problem here. And this is a map to the dark side because we're losing young people in this map. We're losing our youth. If women are not in the mosque, children are not in the mosque. If children are not in the mosque, they're not learning how to pray. And if people are in the mosque, and the mosque is not a spiritual place to be, it's still a map to the dark side. If it's a place where it's stressful, a place where it's not a home, these are all serious questions we have to ask ourselves. We have to ask ourselves, what is my role to ensure that I create a light side in my place of worship? What am I going to do to make sure that the Muslim family is the envied family, not the family of oppression, not the family of spiritual abuse, but the family that everyone else wishes they could be part of. In the United States, we have a very, very popular but small religious group called Mormons. Do you have Mormons here in the UK? Not so much, maybe. Anyway, it's a very small offshoot of Christianity. And they have some, pardon me for saying, but they have some aqeedah issues that are really, they don't make any sense at all, okay? At all. Pardon me if any of you used to be Mormon, but it's just doesn't make any sense. And so, but nonetheless, people are converting to Mormonism. They're not converting to Mormonism because they're convinced of aqeedah issues that seem strange. They're converting to Mormonism because Mormons walk proud with their moral code. They're proud of their moral code. They're strong families. They're happy and strong families. And I look at that as an American, and I think, what's going on with Muslims? When will we be the family everyone else wishes they could be? When will we be the place where everyone says, oh man, I wish I was born into a Muslim family. They're so happy. There's so much joy. There's so much deep faith and understanding and love. You can see it. It's palpable. I can feel it. We all know we're not that right now, right? I mean, right now we're the cranky group. We're the group everyone's frowning all the time and cranky, and we're all hiding little secrets of oppression and abuse and problems and blah and blah. Nope. Happiness is not coming from families. And I hope I'm wrong about your families, but in general, that's not the reputation we're building. That is the dark side. That is a map from the dark side. We have been given, as Muslims, a beautiful and incredible map of happiness and joy. A map to the light side, using our metaphor. A map of Jedi life. What does it mean to be a Jedi? It means to be a Jedi, to be something the Jedis say about themselves, that they're peacekeepers. They're not here to make war. That they keep the peace by fighting off darkness, pushing back against ugliness, raising up those who have the power to access the force to make good and positive changes in the universe. That's just sounds like a Muslim to me. Also the thing I'm saying everywhere I go, otherwise the talks are different, you can watch them online, is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would take care of this religion. And in taking care of this religion, one of the ways was that every 100 years or so, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send man yujaddid deenukum, the one who would renew your religion, or revive it, really. Yujaddid, bring back to life. So those people are called the mujaddideen. Spell it in English. What's the middle word? Huh? Jedis. You see? Jedis. So we can all be Jedis if we'll join the crowd of the mujaddideen. To be of those who bring back joyful Islam. To be the Jedis of this time. I'm telling you, this is what we've been called for. To strap our lightsaber on and walk around with it, fighting. These are the maps of the dark side, and these are the places people are living. Muslims are living in trauma. We have post-colonial stress disorder. We have war. So many Syrian people that I know and love have PTSD, actual post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And all of us are suffering from, I don't know if it's a real thing, post-colonial stress disorder, but if it's not a real thing, I made it up and it's a real thing. But I don't know if it's in books. But post-colonial stress disorder is the effects of colonialism on our countries. It's real. There's real trauma there. And it affected us, men and women alike. And we're affected by this trauma. And we're affected by Islamophobia. And we're affected by, let's see, 1096 was the first crusade, and now we're 1,000 years, almost a millennium of purposeful action against Muslims. Of course we're affected by this trauma, but to be eaten up by it, means that we've lost our own selves. We've let them win. And then we have the middle, which is the human capacity for spiritual illness, the human capacity for diseases of the heart. Just as we have the human capacity to be ill internally, we have a human capacity for health. And as Muslims, we are lucky because we've been given very clear and easy access. And we live in a pill society. I mean, everyone who, nowadays, people, they go to the doctor, they want a pill. In the NHS, you don't always give the pill because they cost money, but everybody wants a pill. In America, we hand out the pills really easily. And everybody goes to the doctor and wants a pill, wants a pill, wants a pill, because we all want something to be cured by a pill. The blessing is that as Muslims, we actually have the pills. Between dua, dhikr, salah, fasting, sadaqah, we have them. Those things that cure our inner illness and pull us away from the dark side. And the third place, this is maybe the one that is more difficult because it demands a level of maturity. But I would propose to you that having been around now, we're now in our 15th century. As Muslims, if you compare us in our 15th century to any other group, we're certainly doing a lot better than anybody else was in the 15th century. And I would suggest that in our 15th century, we are ready to be mature enough to peel away the blinders and make sure that when there's oppression on the earth, it's not coming from us. And it's not happening within. That we don't have oppression in our families, in our places of worship, in our community centers, in our organizations, in our nonprofits, that we hold to the utmost of ethical standards, that we don't have money fraud, that we don't have spiritual abuse, that we don't have sexual abuse, that we don't have any of these things. You say, well, we're going to have some. Yeah, because we're over here, we're human. But as a rule, we should be the people that everyone else wishes they could be. That everyone else says, I wish I was born into a Muslim family. I wish I lived next to Muslim neighbors. I wish I worked for a Muslim boss. I wish I went to a school where there were more Muslims who could help me study A, B, or C. This is where we want to be in society. And if we can get away from oppression, then we will get into the space of light. And if we get into the space of light, then we walk into the space of Jedi, Mujaddideen world, where we can carry our metaphorical lightsabers anywhere we want to go and create for ourselves and our children and our friends and our communities and all the people around us. We have to stop being concerned only with Muslims. The Jedis are concerned with every species. Look at them, all the weird species that are Jedis. I shouldn't say weird, they're all just different. From Yoda, who as a child is 50. You guys see Baby Yoda? Baby Yoda's so cute. Baby Yoda's 50 years old. Huh? Yeah. So the different species, the Jedis are of any species. We need to look outside of our communities. We don't want to have xenophobia looking outside. We look outside of our communities and just be the people of love. Be the people of goodness and khair. Be the people of light. Be the people of real light and the light side, the Jedis, Mujaddideen of this time. We are in a time we need money, we need more than one. We need hundreds. Each of you can pick up the lightsaber that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Each one of you will have a different one. That's for tomorrow's lecture, lightsabers. Leaders, don't worry, I remember. And lead us into the next millennial, which will, inshallah, be away from the villainization of Muslims. It's enough. We had enough. It's been 1,000 years. It's enough now. Let's rise up now and be the people that we're meant to be. Those who are meant to be carriers of joy and faith and goodness and excellence, ihsan, and beauty, and bringing all the people along with us, inshallah. Sallallahu ala sayyidina habib Muhammad ala niyyat al-qabul wal-futuh, maghfirah wa rahmah.
Keep the faith.